Ramatoulaye, thank you very much for joining me today.
Thank you, Joanna. Thanks for having me.
And just start by telling me, as corporate AI adoption speeds up, what should AI governance look like?
Let's step back a little bit and look at sort of governance, and then we'll come to AI governance. As a board member, we think of sort of three pillars in our role: strategic insight, dynamic oversight, and accountability. So on the strategic insight front, I think AI just makes it even more important for boards to understand and lean into their role in defining strategy for the organization. That it's not just sort of a presentation that should arrive at the board and they stamp it, but they should really be a part of the horizon scanning in a very dynamic way, being able to bring their diverse experiences together into the boardroom and affect the strategy of the organization. So AI clearly makes it a very dynamic time we're in, where it is very critical for the board to educate itself and then be able to actually play that role of strategic insight. On the second part, oversight is obviously critical, because as much as there is opportunity with AI, we know that there are many risks as well. And to be able to manage that risk, we can't look at risk the same way we used to look at it on the audit and risk committees, where it's in a way it's static. The committee maybe meets twice a year. I think that's an old model. It needs to be more frequent and it needs to be dynamic. The risk register needs to go from being a document to almost a dashboard, a dynamic dashboard. And I think AI will help also accelerate that. Ironically, both as a tool, but also as the thing or the technology that will need that dynamic oversight. And finally, accountability is key, because as it is deployed across the organization, it is very important for the board to know who is ultimately responsible for the decisions that maybe AI is making somewhere within the organization, and for the decisions that the organization is making as part of either its AI strategy or its incorporation of AI into its larger strategies. So it's really along those three parameters that I see corporate AI adoption coming together with a more energized sort of version of governance.
And which services and businesses can the financial sector look to for best practice and inspiration?
I have two examples in mind. So one adjacent, I would say fintech, but to be more specific, fintech in emerging markets. So by background, I used to be CEO of a fintech company across markets in Africa. And when we look at the level of innovation that fintech represents in those markets, I think because of the leapfrogging effect, people, for example, didn't have phones in their homes. So when mobiles came, as a population, they went straight to it, and took to it and ran with it. When it came to financial inclusion as well, not as many people across Africa, for example, have, and in other jurisdictions to be more inclusive, don't have bank accounts. So their experience of financial services is on their phone, whether it's transferring money, receiving money, and then moving on to other services like microcredit or microinsurance. So when you look at that level of innovation, that in my view actually outstrips sort of financial services innovation in the more developed markets, simply because they haven't needed to innovate in that way, I think that businesses can definitely look to those jurisdictions for sort of leadership in innovation. I think another industry that we can also learn from is telecoms. So fintech, like I said, in emerging markets is at that cross section of having a bank account in the phone, but the phone and the data on it, all of that is the telecoms business. And I think telecoms is an essential service, and because of that, I think, and it's also a regulated service, just like financial services, they have learned in telecom to be incredibly mindful of the responsibility of continuity of service, of resilience and redundancy of networks, and having the governance around that. So I think there is something to sort of cross-pollinate there as well. And I'll add one actually, because my more recent sort of corporate roles was with Google. And I think what we can learn from the large tech platforms is sort of the boldness and that innovation at scale and the capacity to bring innovation to scale. Now you can say they do have the scale, so that, and it's unmatched, but I don't think the point is to copy them. And as per your question, is to be inspired by the boldness of the dream, not by the move fast and break things, because when that happens, we know that in financial services, when things break, economies break, and households break. So that is not something that we're interested in experiencing, but really being inspired, I think, by the boldness of the goals.
And how can businesses balance governance and innovation?
There's always a tension there, isn't there? And I think it's a healthy tension, and it's a necessary tension. As I just mentioned, in financial services, to be specific, we really can't afford to move fast and break things. So I think it's important for innovation to be responsible innovation, to be innovation at the intersection of balancing scale, speed, and trust. And how to do that, I think, from a governance perspective, is to be very clear in terms of the terrain and put guardrails in place. I think those guardrails actually help the innovators be able to do so without worrying about sort of firefighting and dealing with things when it seems everything and everybody's kind of going in all directions, doing a number of different things, and it feels chaotic. Yes, something could spring out of it, but then the on a risk-adjusted basis, it may not be the best way. So I think at that intersection, governance and innovation should not and are not at odds with each other. I don't think the risk committee is where good ideas go to die. Not at all. I think together with the risk and risk management is a part of the business, and I think it's important for the guardrails to be integrated very early on and to create a culture where governance and innovation work hand in hand, because I think when it's a culture, it's a habit, and it infuses all the ways in which the organization goes about innovating.
Very interesting. Ramatoulaye, thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you.